Hello, this is Dan Green, and I'm responding to Ashley Crisler, who made a video about Introduction to Apologetics course that she's doing, and so I'm going to be talking to her. Hi, nice to meet you, virtually speaking, of course. I'm a unbeliever, non-believer, skeptic, atheist. I don't know if agnostic really applies to me. Certainly not atheist. I don't like the atheists too much. They annoy both atheists and theists. But at any rate, you present two incomplete arguments, so I'm not going to analyze them too much, but I'm going to tell you what went wrong and why, and give you some ideas of how to improve your argumentation ability. So you first go with the Messiah argument, which is in essence that Jesus performed certain tasks during his lifetime that proved or fulfilled prophecies made in the Torah or the Old Testament. And sometimes along with this argument, you also see mathematical figures of how improbable it would be for him to fulfill all these things. Some of them maybe he could have set up in advance, some of them maybe his followers could have set up, but there's other ones that just are impossible for him to have contrived in such a way, and all of these taken together are just proof that he is the Messiah. There's two problems with, well, there's more than two problems with that. There's a logical problem with it that I'll focus on, and then many other sub-problems. This is called circular reasoning or circular argumentation. What you're doing is you're trying to use the Bible to prove that the Bible is true. You're trying to say, well, Jesus did all these things that are written in the Bible, and these things were written earlier by other people, and Jesus happened to do all those prophecies, and therefore, see, it's true, but it's a circular. It's like saying that this book is true because somewhere in this book it says that this book is true. Well, that's not good enough. That's not a real argument. Here's the other problem with that. That's the logical problem, is circular reasoning. The other problem is any event that comes after some other event is one that I can record as if I fulfilled that event. So, classically speaking, say, take Nostradamus, who made lots of prophecies, many of which didn't come true at all, but people that really buy into this stuff will make excuses for the ones that didn't work or find ways to fit them anyways. And the fact of the matter is, he was just making stuff up. So if today I say, well, tomorrow, somebody's going to post on YouTube that Deconverted Man is awesome, and then lo and behold, tomorrow somebody comes along and does that, does that make me a prophet? No. And if 50 years go by, or even a couple years, whatever, and I said, well, at some point somebody's going to do X, Y, or Z, and somebody that really thinks that their guy, girl, whatever is the bomb and wants to make it seem like I made a prophecy can just say, oh yeah, they totally did the thing that he said that they were going to do. In other words, they made up the story to fit the events of the prophecy. There's nothing to say that the writers of any part of the Bible didn't just go, I really wish that Jesus had fulfilled X, Y, or Z prophecy in the Torah. Let's just say that he did and write a story that makes him fulfill that prophecy. There's other problems with that as well. One of them being that at least one of the prophecies is actually not that they wrote it after, but that the Old Testament verse actually gets changed for the Christian Bible, and if you go to the Torah, you'll see the difference. So that's kind of a big problem. problem there. So it's not that they wrote necessarily the events to match the previous prophecies, but they totally changed what happened before by just rewriting it. If you read up on what the Jewish people think concerning which prophecies, if any, are about the Messiah, or if any prophecies are made about the Messiah, you'll see that their understanding of it is completely different. If anyone was going to identify the Messiah, it would be the Jews. But Jesus didn't fulfill any of the requirements that they had. But that doesn't really matter for Christians. But there's many, many problems to that. Then you go to the resurrection of Jesus, which is also called the empty tomb argument. Although you don't spell it out in full, I'll go ahead and spell it out for you. In essence, it's that Jesus died. This is recorded that all his disciples thought he was dead, and then later he reappeared to them, and they all talked about it, even though and then of course they were persecuted and killed for it. Now in this video, and again, this is circular reasoning because you're just using the Bible to prove that the Bible is true. There's nothing to say that none of that actually happened. That not only did Jesus not do any of those things, or perhaps even exist, but also the disciples did none of those things, and perhaps even the disciples didn't exist. They could have made the whole thing up. Now, you might see that as a outlandish and absurd proposition, but it is possible. And so, skeptically, I have to say no to that argument. It's not really an argument. So, the other part where you say, well, they died for these beliefs, and why else would they do that? Again, you're assuming that the story is true. And when you hit a narrative, and when you read through the Gospels, a lot of times it's weird because they can't be talking about their own death. And then his head got chopped off. Well, that's somebody else reporting on these events, supposedly. But who? Who was following this disciple around, even to the point where he's being executed, to be able to record it? Or are they relying on hearsay? I mean, how did this happen? So there's problems with that. Dying for a belief does not make that belief true. There are more and more Muslims, and they're all too happy, many of them, to kill themselves for their God. That doesn't make their belief true. They will, under torture, people have not repented or have not changed their position from whatever it was to a different position. Whether it be somebody trying in the Christian Crusades trying to make people into Christians, or whether it be some other religion trying to torture people into their religion, or whatever, it doesn't work, because that pain that you're inflicting upon that person just makes that person more sure that they're right. So even if the disciples really existed, and even if they really died for these things that they thought really happened, that doesn't make any of the things that they thought really happened true. Okay, so that's a tough thing to accept. And that's only the beginning of the problems with these two arguments. They're not arguments, because an argument has a syllogism, which is two premises and a conclusion classically, but it can be more than that. There's no rule against it, and you would need to study some logic, specifically informal logic, to get a better grasp of how to make an argument. This one is my favorite book, Pragmatic Approach by Douglas Walton, and it's called Informal Logic. So read, study, and if you want help to understand this, totally help you with it. because I love logic. Okay, so those two arguments don't work, and they won't, because all you're doing is saying the Bible's true because the Bible says it's true. That won't convince a non-believer. It won't convince a skeptic. So what will, you might be wondering? Well, I've been doing this for a while, and I have yet to find a logically coherent argument for the existence of God, or for any supernatural phenomenon, or anything even close. But that doesn't mean it's not out there. First and foremost, you have to know how it works. You have to know logic. It is akin to, I would say, if we were to play chess and one of us is a grandmaster and the other one is an amateur. Sure, maybe the amateur might win, but I wouldn't bet on it. So if you don't understand the rules and format of informal logic, you're not going to be able to win. You're not going to be able to make a coherent argument. And unfortunately, although apologetics is presented as a way to defend your faith, it is simply a way to reaffirm to yourself that your faith is true. It doesn't convince anybody. Or if it does, I'm not aware of it, or they already were wanting to be convinced. And that's not, it doesn't do what it wants to do. But all the arguments that are classical arguments have been around for ages. You have St. Augustine's 5 proofs. You have the Kalam cosmological argument, which is wrong both on a logical level and on a scientific level. You have, as you presented, the Messiah argument, the empty tomb argument, and there's others, but those are really kind of their argument from morals, or argument from evil, and things of this nature. And there's different arguments, but there's no new argument. And so you, being young and having lots of energy and a good brain inside your skull, hopefully, can take the time and energy to learn informal logic and study the old arguments and find where they're flawed, and then make a new argument that doesn't have any logical fallacies. And when you are at that point, then simply present that argument, and I'll analyze it, and I'll tell you whether or not it did have fallacies or not. And if it doesn't, you'll be the first, and that will cause me to further investigate the religion that I already left behind, because I could find no evidence, no test, and no logically coherent argument for it. I'm not asking you for evidence. I'm not asking you for the archaeology. I'm not asking you for the history. I'm not asking you for repeatable tests. I'm asking you for a logical argument, which is hypothetically the easiest of those to give. Hopefully you'll take that challenge. And I really hope that you'll listen to what I had to say, and you'll understand better why your ideas don't withstand critical analysis. Also, you did mention one other thing that I have to bring up. You claimed that Christianity is unique. That's not true, but even if it was, it would not be relevant. Just because something is unique doesn't make it true. I could say, well, my religion is about a lobster who ate the first deity that existed and then became the deity of all and made the universe so that it could have lobsters here on Earth. And I even have a book that says that that's true in the book. Amazing how that works. But there's really no good reason to believe that lobsterist is the one true religion. It is, but there's no really good reason to believe it, even though it's true. I have to do that. You have to understand. Actually, I have this inside joke going on with my viewers that I. Oh, never mind. It's not important. Okay. Look, I think this might be your first video on YouTube. gonna click just to make sure. And if it is, welcome to the internet. Maybe you've been around. No, okay, you want another video about starting an engine. I don't know anything about cars, so I'm not gonna watch that video. I hope that you'll listen to what I had to say, think about it, study informal logic, and as far as apologetics go, it's so worn. It's so worn. We've heard these arguments. Please come up with a new argument. Thanks for listening.